Lisa Strom, head women's golf coach at Kent State University. Welcome.
Hey, Doug. Thanks for having me.
Sure. We're in a little bit of a weird time here, so it's a good time to catch up and share some stories and see if we can pass on some knowledge to others.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely something you and I have never been through as people, and I think that's the number one thing we're trying to convey to our student athletes these days is we don't have all the answers. So, a lot of people are in this state of uncertainty, and it definitely is just an unprecedented time in college athletics, and regardless of where you are in the world, it's impacting everybody.
Awesome. And by the way, since I see where you're at there, where in the world are you?
Well, I mean, we can't go anywhere right now recruiting wise. So I figured I'd do as best I could to check out Old Head, a great golf trip I got to go on a few years ago with some donors at Ohio State and our assistant coach here, Jenny Gleason. So Old Head it is today for our chat.
That looks amazing. So let's just talk about your story a little bit. Obviously, you're an amazing player first. So let's talk about growing up, junior golf, played college golf. Talk about how you got to where you are right now.
Yeah, my story might be a little different than some people's, but I think it relates to some of the late bloomers. So I started playing golf probably when I was 8, 9, 10 years old. Got into it a little bit more as I got a little older, and my dad introduced me to the game. My mom, my brother both played, so we'd play as a family foursome. We'd go on family vacations. And I grew up playing in South Dakota as a junior golfer. So a lot of people ask, wow, the season must have been really short there. The big thing I often think back of and remember and enjoy about my childhood was all the sports I did play. So as much as our season was kind of short, we had long summer days to play a lot of golf. We were playing golf till about 10:30 at night sometimes, but we transitioned into other sports very quickly. We'd go into basketball season. I remember leaving the state tournament for golf as an 8th grader. I was playing on the high school team, and then transferred into basketball season very quickly, and leaving the state tournament even to go to a freshman basketball game. So, at times, I think the multi-sport facet of growing up in that athletic environment. My brother was an athlete. He played basketball, football, soccer, and golf. I mean, we didn't really think much about we were missing out as far as golf season's concerned. We weren't as focused, on a one sport kind of deal. And quite frankly, I think it develops the whole athlete socially, leadership skills, being a teammate. College golf is a team sport. And coming into my high school years, and we transferred to Pennsylvania. My dad got a different job there with the same company. So, at that point, I was still playing high school basketball, golf, soccer. And, I still look back, and I've asked Therese this a number of times, my coach at Ohio State, what made you take a chance on someone like me who played in one age AGA event my entire junior career, played in local PGA section events in the Philly section, which was a great junior golf section. And she said, the biggest thing for her was the heart and then the drive to get better. She could tell that, as far as athletic ability and potential, that was already there. So it was a matter of just getting kids in that wanted to be coached and wanted to get better. So, that's kind of what led me to Ohio State and wanting to play for a coach that knew what it was like. And she played on the LPGA tour. And so she knew the stress you might feel with making putts that mean a lot. So that kind of sums it up, I think, from junior to college.
Was it a big jump for you playing junior golf to college golf?
Yeah, I stunk. I give this talk to a lot of kids who struggle their first year in college golf. All of a sudden, you're juggling, doing your laundry, waking up, going to class, working out. A lot of people, that's totally a new concept. And doing it on your own. Setting your own alarms, not having mom and dad have dinner waiting for you. So despite having a lot of stuff done for you from the college coaching side of things, we do a lot for our student athletes. It's still a lot for them to manage when they get to school. So my first year, as much as I was pretty independent and I wasn't homesick by any means, but my big thing was the adjustment to the competition. I hadn't been around players that were better than me very often. We had a team of, I think our roster was anywhere between 10 and 12 players, my freshman year. And I just wasn't going to play. So eventually it led to me redshirting. And redshirting is not a bad thing. It was the best thing that could have happened for me because it kind of allowed me to progress. It also allowed me to kind of look inside and be like, why do I play this game? And then came back my sophomore year, was just still so-so. We were still a very good team nationally, and obviously, had a good run going in the Big Ten at that point. So I kind of, my sophomore year, qualified for one event, got to go to Hawaii for spring break, good one to qualify for. And then the summer after that, second year in school, I just decided, look, like I got to get better. I didn't like sitting at home. I didn't like see my teammates travel, get to come back and talk about all they'd done on the road. And it stunk. So the summer between those second and third year of school, my first and second year of actual playing, I decided to stay with a friend up in the Boston area. I worked at a golf school up there outside of Boston, set up the range in the morning, helped them, get their golf balls situated for the golf school they were going to have. And then I got free reign to go practice and play, do as much as I could that summer. And my parents were very supportive in that. Normally I'd had a job that I was kind of, putting together a little bit of savings, and they knew that I wanted to be committed to see how good I could be. And so that led certainly to coming back and going into qualifying. Everyone's got those, usually a big qualifier in the fall when you come back to that first tournament. And I'll never forget Trish kind of coming up to me after the final round of the qualifier, and she's like, what happened over the summer? What did you do? I'm like, I just got sick of being bad. And, and that just shows you kind of really when you put your mind to something and you really go after it, and you kind of set your mindset of, hey, I'm going to get better. The only thing stopping you in the end of the day is yourself. So at a, young age, 19, 20-year-old kid, I was like, put my mind to getting better.
Absolutely. Yeah, you had the drive to get better, and you did everything you could to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't have, the resources. Like we didn't have TrackMan. We didn't have Sand Putt Lab, whatever else, Blast Motion. We didn't have all the technology, but, we had ball flight. We knew what it looked like. We didn't maybe necessarily know how to teach it better, but I think there's just still a lot to be said with flashy facilities, and then trying to attract the top ranked kids or the best players in the world. We're finding out right now, this day and age, right now when we can't be out recruiting and it's a dead period and we can't be off campus, they can't come to campus. We're finding out what really matters most is how much coaches love to coach, love to lead their young student athletes, and how much the kids get influenced by the flashy stuff along the way. And I think that, when it really boils down to it, if kids are making really good decisions, comparing apples to apples, how good you want to be, and it comes down to how good is the instruction you're going to get, the coaching you're going to get, and the opportunity to get better.
Have you found so far that from a coaching standpoint, certain kids that have the flashy stuff compared to kids that don't, there's a difference between them, or a separator between maybe kids that don't have some things want it more, or they work harder, or any separations that you're seeing?
It's kind of a yin and a yang sometimes. Some kids that do have a lot growing up tend to think it just kind of comes naturally, and they kind of stand there with their hands open. But, I think also the mindset of someone is a very learned and trainable asset that people don't tap into, and I think if you're not training your mindset, if you're not controlling what you can control right now in this day and age, you might go crazy. You might have moments where you just are going to have a breakdown because so much of this world right now is out of our control. And that's, I think I take a lot of pride in the fact that not only I myself have trained a ton to handle these moments that we never knew were coming. I mean, who would have thought 6 weeks ago our season would come to an abrupt end? But it's our job too to lead these kids and to train them that they can handle these moments. And this is part of life. This is part of dealing with, curveballs are going to keep coming. That's a guarantee. And I think that's an important lesson. It's a really hard lesson to learn right now when you're going through this. But if we keep perspective, kind of zoom out a little bit, like zooming out of old head here, like if you keep perspective, it doesn't look maybe as bad as what you are, maybe kind of stuck in some moments. And that's been kind of my encouragement to our team. throughout this whole time is there is a lot of uncertainty, but let's get back to what we can control, what we can do.
Well, I mean, if you take it down to a really small thing, it goes back to a golf shot. There's uncertainty. There's factors that are in trees, bunkers, things that are coming at us, other thoughts that creep in our mind. Those are all things that's just going to happen, and it's how we handle that adversity. And those that know how to handle it better are more successful.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're going to get bad bounces. Doug, you and I have a great relationship, outside of golf, but I mean, that's going to happen whether you're in golf or not, but it's a great way to teach the lessons that life throws at you. And then that's what I use, golf, try to tell our girls, like, we got to use the sport instead of letting the sport use us. So right now we got to use life instead of life dictating our mindset. It's got to start from in here and work its way out.
Certainly. So let's just go back from where you are now, looking back to where you were in college. What would you tell yourself now, or what would you tell yourself when you were in college from where you're standing now?
I think, being patient is a big thing. Understanding there's a bigger plan. I don't know that I would try to fast forward anything, and say like, hey, it's going to be okay. But I think because you have to go through those bumps in the road to learn. The acceptance of things too is huge. Hey, when I turned pro, I wanted to, be on the LPGA tour, be the #1 player in the world. But with that came even more work and even more pressure and even more, it's just another level up. And I think, looking back on my college days, I probably tell myself, and this is, not to be even really much of a joke, but listen to my coaches more. I think we think we have it all figured out at that point. And when you're coachable and you can learn from people that have been in shoes that you want to walk in, it's not going to be the exact same journey for sure. Nobody has the same journey in life, but when they've been through those things and you think you have it figured out, yet they've actually walked through those things, kind of just sitting back and saying, you know what, maybe there is something I can learn from it. It's like parents, right? Neither one of us are parents, but
Certainly.
We look back and the things that our moms and dads have told us, it's like, man, they were right. And if we could just kind of get to the idea of maybe, not that they're right all the time, and not that we can't challenge them. Like sometimes our beliefs are different than our parents, and that's totally okay. But I think there's something to be said for some wisdom through experience. And that's probably what my encouragement to myself would have been, is like, hey, you're going to go through some really rough patches in golf and in life, and it's going to be okay. And it's going to make you a better person later on.
Right. Even going back, would you tell yourself something different when you played professional golf now when you played professional golf?
Yeah, stick with what you believe in too. I think you get a lot of stuff thrown at you when you turn pro. You might be on the driving range, and not that the LPGA is a little bit of a different animal than maybe the PGA Tour, but you're going to have companies that want you to play their driver or their putter, and it's like, man, I'm really good with what I have, and I think that's okay. Change doesn't, we see it with, people changing golf balls, and all of a sudden they fall off with their rankings, and it's like, man, where'd they go? And then all of a sudden they get back to the golf ball they were playing and they win. So I think owning what you do, that goes in life, right, Doug? Like how you teach, like own how you teach, because nobody teaches like you, and nobody should. Like everybody's got to have their way to figure it out. And that's what makes, I think, being able to connect with someone like, hey man, I really like how he describes that. And once you find that kind of relationship, I think it totally helps. So believing in what you do and owning that is huge.
Yeah, I mean, I think you see that across the board, right? You have success, you get out to the tour, people change coaches, people change their teams. Then it becomes sometimes it's a waterfall effect of everything's just lost.
Yeah, and caddies is a huge step, for a lot of players from college golf to professional golf. I mean, not the mini tour so much, but there's caddies that want to be very involved in your career, selfishly. And it's not to mean that every caddy out there is, but you've got to, again, the leadership skills that I think you can learn in college become very transferable. Like, hey, how am I going to manage my team? It's the same way I think about how I manage our team and what role I play, what role each team member plays, what role Jenny, our assistant, plays, and I think that's again, the valuable experience you can have if you use your sport and use your opportunities, instead of just kind of going along and riding along in the wave of like, oh, this is what's next. Because then all of a sudden, when push comes to shove, you're going to get swayed in a direction that maybe you didn't intend.
Certainly, especially the player has to be the one being the coach at that point. They're the leader. They're the one in charge. So I think the earlier that you can kind of be that person, even as a junior golfer, having more decision-making skills is going to lead you to have more success down the road in whatever you do.
Yeah.
Because I think we get stuck on, if I'm a golfer, I want to play the professional tour. If I'm going to play junior golf to college golf to, well, not. I think they realize that, a lot of kids realize that in college, that I don't want to play professional golf. This isn't what I want to grind on every day.
Right. It's a key component, though, is like why they're doing it, right? Figuring that out.
Right.
You want a coach to kind of maybe guide that path for the player without taking it over. I think the ownership
Have you
is huge.
found it from playing to coaching? Was that a big hurdle for you? Kind of taking all the decisions from yourself to trying to apply them to other players, other people?
Yeah, I mean,
taking the energy away from yourself.
Yeah. Professional golfers are selfish, right? It's all about, I mean, you know how it is. You've caddied for some.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I'll be out in about 15 minutes from the locker room, and it's like an hour and a half later.
Yeah.
Where the heck is everybody? Right? You're standing by the putting green. I mean, in general, and maybe not always intentional, but in general, it's about you, and that works for some people. I'm by nature a very unselfish person, trying to be very giving of my time. So there was a little bit of a tug of war going on inside me, because I was like, man, I feel like this isn't really about me. Like, life outside of this golf thing is different than what I'm doing when I'm in my job arena. So getting into coaching, I mean, I think part of me was a little bit, hey, why don't these players want to get better right now? Why don't they want to put in extra hours? Why don't they want to call me up and say, hey, what can I work on? And then you kind of scale it back a little bit and be like, oh, wait, I got to learn how to connect with them first. And Therese sat me down. She was great at it. One of my first little one-on-one sessions, mid-year reviews with her. She's like, look, you can't talk to every kid the same. Good friend of mine was like, hey, they don't need 2 head coaches. That was probably really valuable advice for me. I was kind of probably coming across more of kind of a dominating coach at that point of like, hey, you got to get this, this, and this. So I needed to find out my role and realize that I need to be the buffer a lot of times. And they give them that safety net of, hey, I can come to you with a problem, even though I know you might have to go to coach about it, knowing that they could come to me and we could work something out and kind of work through things. So once you learn those roles, though, I think you start to kind of balance things out. And Teresa and I had a great thing going from 3 straight years. Winning that Big Ten championship was awesome. We had great runs at nationals. And, I think a lot of that hinged on part of, me realizing I didn't have to be the sheriff in town, and it was okay to be just kind of like, hey, I'm leading you. And I dove into a big journey. I've got books, not that you can see at Old Head, but on a bookshelf that, I've read probably, upwards of 100 books in the last 7 years or so. But again, it comes down to, that's a lot of knowledge, and how are you applying it? And I'm big into the action side of things. So it's great to have knowledge base and make some decisions for yourself on how you want to do things. But then, taking that information and applying it. A lot of kids started asking me when we were traveling, hey, what are you reading now? And I'm like, wow, now I know I'm making an impact. And I was reading The Energy Bus. And then so all of a sudden some kids started reading The Energy Bus by John Gordon, or, I was reading Mindset by Carol Dweck, or, it's just that kind of opened my eyes to the fact that what I say matters. So you have to be very intentional with your words as a coach, because as much as you think they aren't listening, at the end of the day, they absorb a lot.
Right. Like junior golfers, you think they're not paying attention, but they are.
Yeah. And it's funny, they'll catch you too, because it's like, you might go for a couple weeks without them really giving you much feedback. And then all of a sudden they're like, hey, when you said that back in January, you're like,
right. So going to that, do you think, do you see a maturity level of kids coming out of high school in the college golf maturing at different states, or do you think they get to a certain year and they kind of hit the maturity, or it's just different across the board?
Yeah, I think it's just so individual. I think a lot of it depends on their upbringing, how much was required of them, maybe what they've been through. As you know, on the personal side of things, I've coached some players that have lost their fathers or mothers, or stuff like that happens at a young age that other kids in their age category haven't gone through. And guess what? They show a greater sense of maturity because of those life skills that they've had to learn and go through and cope. In my experience, they don't tend to get as upset about the smaller things. And so, again, I think it just kind of goes back to, I don't think it's a boy-girl thing. I think everyone is, these brains are just developing. We're coaching 18 to 22-year-olds who have a prefrontal cortex that is not fully developed. And yet we expect them to make really wise decisions at times. And it's just not going to happen. They need to make mistakes and learn from them. And that's okay. That's the environment you want to create as a coach, is that failure is okay. It's inevitable and it's okay. And we're going to learn from it. I had a coach tell me one time, one of the coaches I worked with when I was playing, and he basically, it was Sean Foley. He said to me, he's like, my job is to get you so prepared that you don't need me around. And I think that sometimes coaches' egos get in the way. They want the recognition of having helped someone so much. And I think sometimes we got to dial it back and be like, hey, you know what? I'm just kind of like this facilitator. Whatever happens outside of that is whatever. It is what it is. But I want to make sure that I'm all in on each kid.
Certainly. Yeah, I think from my standpoint, it's definitely helping kids get recruited. The maturity level means a lot in their results, and helping them get recruited. When that happens, sometimes it happens too late. Sometimes the player might be really talented, but you can just tell the maturity level, and keep up on that as well, of what you're looking to build around your team. And I think that's a very difficult thing to work through at times.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, late bloomers. I was a late bloomer. I mean, I don't know. 20 years ago, a lot of us were late bloomers. It's just because everything was slower. Everything today seems so. If it happened and it's 24 hours have passed, it's old news. And so I think people forget the point of like, hey, delaying some gratification is okay. And that's a great way to kind of instill the fact that, in your young people and in junior golfers or college golfers, like, this is a long process. And if you want to make a career out of this is a long career. So we can't be getting hung up on, one round of shooting 78 or, a bad day of practice, when we're talking the next 30 years of playing this game, maybe at a really high level. And then I think, the maturity side of helping them through some stuff like that, whether it's teachable lessons that carry over to life. But, I think maturity comes in spurts, and you learn from making mistakes, but I think there's no substitute for time. Can't press a fast forward button on a kid and just hope it works out. But, late bloomers, let me tell you, there's so many opportunities in college. Like, you don't have to play at a top D1 program.
Right.
You don't have to play at a Power 5 school to get a great opportunity to develop the skills you need later on in professional golf. In fact, if you have less and you do great, there's more likelihood, I think, that you have a chance to succeed later on. I mean, I just think if you've really seen the value of your hard work over 4 years at a smaller school, I don't care if it's D2, D3, whatever it looks like, there's no requirement on the PGA or LPGA tour that you play at a Power 5 D1 school.
Right. I think you go from a college tournament to then walking out on the range at a Q school or LPGA tour event, nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
You're not carrying a team bag. Nobody cares.
Right. And quite honestly, if you think people care, you're wrong, because it's lonely. I think that's the flip side of college golf to professional golf, and people are in such a hurry to get out of college. It's like, you don't have a team around you anymore. You might have a caddy and a family member or a spouse or whatever that looks like. But I mean, you don't have this group of people that you show up at a tournament and they're all cheering for you. And it can get very lonely. And you can see, some players that have gone through some stuff with, the tough side of mental health and depression, and people fight through some stuff. It's not all glitz and glamour. It's not, private airplanes. And especially now, I mean, it's been very humbling, I think, to see the world of sports come to a screeching halt. And those that we had on a pedestal meant so much. And now guess who the most important people are out there? The health workers, the doctors and the nurses that are taking care of these people. And I think maybe it's a wake-up call to society in a way that sports brings a lot of people together. I'm not discounting that at all. I think it's a great way to share laughs and camaraderie and togetherness. But I think it also is a big wake-up call to really, how important is a huge multi-million-dollar contract for someone. I think it's been a little bit exposed.
Absolutely. So let's speaking of that, let's go back. So you just took over at Kent State. They've won, I believe it's 21 straight MAC championships. Put a dash next to that this year.
Yeah, I guess we can still consider our streak alive since we didn't have it.
Okay, there we go. Love it. So let's talk through it. You guys won. You won every tournament but 2 after taking over. Talk us through what it's like coming down the stretch as a coach. Teams close to lead or got the lead. What's it look like behind the scenes, coaching a team to a victory?
Yeah, I mean, it's number one, winning in college doesn't happen super often for most teams. So, I've always savored victories. I've always encouraged our teams whenever we've won. It's been a big deal. It's been a celebration. It's been, hey, this is what you get for a lot of hard work. Coming down the stretch, I wish we could televise more college golf. Because I think it'd be great. There's so many storylines, so many things happen. We won by 1 at Medina in the fall. Kaylee McGinty made like a 40-footer, and she didn't even pull the flag. Jenny had asked her, hey, do you want me to tend it? No, just leave it. She never leaves the flag in. And this thing rattled off the flagstick and fell in, which was her last hole. Corey had already finished on that hole, so she was kind of behind the green waiting on her to finish. That happens. You see another player make birdie from a long ways away, but you see that go in, and you're just like, all of a sudden it flipped from us being 1 down to 1 ahead. And like, if they could have cameras on that, it'd just be such an amazing story to tell. So I think, a lot of that happens throughout the U.S. and in college golf when it's especially a 1-2 stroke advantage at the end of the day. Obviously, they're a lot of fun when you start pulling away and you start kind of seeing the momentum building that we're going to keep the gas pedal down. And this team.
So are you feeling that along the way, or are you realizing that it's happening? Are you kind of feeling it? You feeling the energy?
Yeah, there was so at UCF this year, and this is just me being really honest as a coach, I didn't have a good feeling that week. There was just a kind of a weird kind of vibe. It was a lot of stuff going on. We were staying in a house all together, and I was around all the girls, but I just was like, man, it's not the same as what I've felt. This was our first event of the spring, and we'd won 3 out of 4 in the fall, and like, man, I can't put a finger on it. We'll see what happens though. But if they win this week, it's going to be something special this spring. And sure enough, we had a bad first round. I'm like, man, I can almost feel it. And they bounced back. And let me tell you, this round 2 and round 3, they put the hammer down. And, amongst themselves, they didn't talk. They don't talk much. There's not a lot of rah-rah going on or, hey, we got this. And quite frankly, whether we had a great round or substandard round, it was our first round above par, that first round of the tournament that week. First round above par as a team the entire season. So we played 13 rounds at that point. Yeah, 13 rounds. And so, but there was no like car ride back to the house and like, hey, we got to get this back, or hey, they just didn't need that, which I think makes them kind of, that's how special this team was, is they already just kind of knew what they needed to do and get refocused. So next day they went out there, went pretty low. And then the next day we just kind of kept pulling away. I think it was within 1 or 2 shots heading into the final round, and then we kind of stretched it out. What's that like? I mean, it's when you start making some birdies early in the round, you take advantage of some par fives. And quite frankly, in college golf, if you can take advantage of the par fives, that's your number one, you know, and they started doing that day, and got through a couple tough stretch of holes. Number 8's a tough par 3 there, got through that pretty well. And they did a great job. So, I mean, you know, at the end of the day, you kind of let them do it, you know, and I think a lot of coaches want to be involved and highly involved. And I was just making sure they had water and snacks and whatever else they needed. And we had a 5 o'clock flight that we needed to make. So at the end of the day, we were like, all right.
On a rush.
Yep.
So are you and Ginny at that point, like bouncing back and forth, talking on the phone? What's your communication? Are you get over there, check out 6, or are you kind of set up where you're going to be and just let it play out?
Yeah, Jenny and I had pretty much all year. Our game plan was help where they needed. So I'd often ask, hey, is there some holes that you need anything on? Is there anybody that wants me to walk with them? Jenny spent about 95% of her time. So pretty much, unless she was in the bathroom, making the turn or grabbing a sandwich or something, she was with Kaylee, our freshman. And so she walked with her. And this is kind of, you know, an anecdotal story, but in Albuquerque, our first tournament of the year, we get out there and, you know, the carts are all lined up. We're at University of New Mexico's golf course, and red carts are just lined up everywhere. And first round of the tournament, and you take some things for granted, right? I've been in coaching a while. I played college golf, so got a lot of experience with shotgun starts, and tried to explain some of it to our freshmen, maybe that hadn't, you know, it's the first time through. And Jenny went down to give them their scorecards, and I mean, Kaylee just kind of stared at this card. Jenny's like, is everything okay? She's like, yeah, I don't know what to do next. She'd already hit balls. She's like, have you putted? No, I haven't putted. Grab your putt. I mean, it was very much like, grab your putter, go to the putting green. I'll meet you back at your bag. And so she ended up going out on the golf course with her to get that shotgun start going. And Jenny's like, I think I'm just going to stick with her. I'm like, get her off to a great start. Feel like you got good mojo going, stay with it. And here, you know, there we are all the way to February, and pretty much they had walked every hole of the season together. What Kaylee learned, I think, from it, they don't do shotgun starts in England very often, or in Europe. So, I mean, that was the big thing for her. She's like, I just don't know what's going on. Kaylee came up to us in practice a few weeks ago, and she kind of just was like, hey, you know, I haven't had more than 2 rounds in the 60s between January and August before coming here. I'm like, really? She's like, you don't know how many I have now? And I think her number was 10 at that point, not including Houston's event. She led the nation in final round scoring average. And, you know, it's huge for a freshman coming in that really was unsure. And her main goal was to make the lineup. So, you know, I go back to, you know, sometimes our goals that we set, we blow through them, and then all of a sudden we're like, now what? And so back to the original question, do we have a plan? That this year was very much like, hey, let's get this player needs some direction. I'll kind of handle the other 4, and I'd bounce around. And like I said, I'd honestly just be like, hey, do you need some bottled water? Hey, you need this, sunscreen? What's anything else going on? And they were very independent, which is nice. I mean, it makes your job. You know, I've been in programs at Texas State even that doing a lot of instruction and a lot of teaching and a lot of course management. So it was a big change.
Yeah, I think that goes back to kind of the maturity level of where everybody's at, right? They were experienced and veteran, and they kind of knew how to handle themselves, and they needed help. Hopefully they'd ask for it. And that's being a great coach and reading the situation, though. Yeah,
I mean, it doesn't mean that I didn't want to jump in sometimes, but I think you're right. The awareness, self-awareness is huge as a coach of knowing when the right times. I messed up with a player this actually, it ends up being our last tournament we played in, and she was a senior, and I asked her about a hole, and I just gotten her scorecard from the final round in Houston, and I looked at her and I was like, hey, now that we're done, like, what's wrong with number 7 this week? She looked at me and she's like, I don't want to talk about it. So a couple of days went by, and I talked to a coaching buddy of mine, and he's like, you know, maybe you just need to swallow your pride and apologize. Like, hey, this was just a wrong time to ask you about that. And that's what I did. You know, a couple of days later at practice, we were at the back of the range. It was pouring down rain. This girl practices her heart out. Great player. And I said, look, I got to tell you something. I did a poor coaching job after that final round in Houston. She kind of was like, what? Like, it's fine. I'm like, no, 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 I need to apologize. I said, I'm sorry. Like, that was uncalled for. And I think it opened her eyes to the fact that, like, hey, it resonated with me and it sat with me for a while. Like, I felt bad. And coaches need to be okay with apologizing, messing up. We're not perfect. We're learning along with them. And if you kind of give them a little glimpse of that vulnerability, that's a huge step in building some trust in a relationship with a player. And, unfortunately we don't get to finish out our season and kind of see where that all would have gone. But, I think at the end of the day, I can put my head on the pillow at night and know I did the best thing I could do for her.
Certainly. Yeah, I think we're all going to have those situations to where we look back and I come better, and we got to take it as a learning experience and move on and use it, put it in our pocket for next time. And hopefully it helps us in a different situation, because it's got to be coaching is very difficult, and you got to be revolving and being a good problem solver and take the lumps and take the success and keep trying to learn and get better.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've had a lot of people reach out and like, man, you're the first program I thought of when this whole thing happened, as far as college golf is concerned. And I was like, it does stink. We were having a magical run. We were having a great time. We were on a great journey. But it just, this is out of our control. And so much of this is going to just kind of hopefully fuel the players that are returning to come back and really just kind of pick up where we left off. And who knows what that's going to look like. There's so many uncertainties right now that right now we just got to kind of take one day and just keep building on that. But I would say,
Certainly.
For me, learning a lot from you, Doug, I think there's been times where maybe it's like, hey, I worked with this kid and we worked on this, and you know what, we've had to shift gears. It didn't resonate. So you also get it from a coaching or a teaching standpoint of, if things aren't working, you have to pivot. You can't just keep beating your head against the wall too.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about coaching is we know what has to happen, and how we get there is many different ways and is undetermined. We got to figure out the way to get there.
Yeah. All those paths look so different. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think you covered a lot of the things that I had to question you about. Is there anything specifically that you wanted to discuss or talk about?
Hey, I think it's just my big thing is just the encouragement of during this time and the unknowns. It's making sure people are reaching out, social distancing and all that stuff. It's not meant to isolate people and not connect. And I think maybe if we learn anything from this, it's like, hey, we have a lot of resources that 20 years ago, this wouldn't have been happening. And to really reach out to people, and connect with them during this time. There's no reason, and a couple of coaching friends and I have talked about this, there's no reason to get back to our normal when eventually that does happen, because it will, and be underprepared. I think there's, a big part of a coaching community, and as far as, teaching golf and all that, like if you struggled in maybe social media, or if you struggled in recruiting, or if you struggled in, for me, whether it's a teaching aspect, it's learning about force plates, it's learning about other stuff, like this is the time to do it. So don't waste
Right.
it. Don't just put it off to tomorrow that, oh, I'll get to it. Like use your time, as unstructured as it might be, create a structure that you can use and be better as we come back.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely have some time we wouldn't normally have, and it's a good time to catch up a little bit and do some things we wouldn't normally get to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, National Coach of the Year, we appreciate your time and the upcoming season, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Doug, I can't thank you enough, and my big acknowledgement would be to you, as much as you've helped me and in my career as a teacher of the game. I think it's just invaluable. So I appreciate you having me on today. And I know you've got a lot of great people that you're asking some great questions, and hopefully people tune in and learn a lot. There's just so many great minds out there that you're able to connect with. And I just appreciate you taking the time for me too.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Coach.
Thanks, Doug.
Perfect.